Have you ever done something small, something barely memorable, and years later discovered it changed someone's life forever? Katie Dawson thought she was just doing a favor. One snowy morning, she stepped in for her sick sister to nanny a little girl she'd never met, in a house that didn't feel like it could ever be hers. But behind that elegant door wasn't just a child. There was a memory waiting, a man grieving, a life paused in silence. She didn't know the little girl remembered her voice from years ago. She didn't know the father had been holding onto a letter she once wrote and never signed. She didn't know that stepping through that door meant stepping into something her heart had been searching for. What would you do if you were asked to care for a stranger's child, only to realize you already had? If you had to choose between the life you planned and the one unfolding before your eyes, this is not just a story about love. It's about timing, choices, and the quiet ways we save each other. If you've ever believed that kindness leaves a mark, like share and subscribe to our channel, let your heart settle in. Now, let's begin. Katie Dawson hadn't planned on leaving the house that Friday morning. Not when the air outside bit through windows like cold needles. Not when the news forecast warned of another snowstorm sweeping through Maplewood. And definitely not when her own heart still felt like winter silent, fragile, grieving. But her phone had rung at 6 to 12. Laura's voice hoarse and panicked on the other end. I can't go, Kate. I've got a fever, chills I can barely sit up. Please, just for one day. He said it's a simple nanny job. One kid. Katie glanced at the calendar. It was the anniversary of Mom's passing. She had planned to stay home, make coffee, maybe read something comforting, but there was something in Laura's voice, something desperate. So she said yes. And now, bundled in her mother's old beige coat, Katie stood in front of a grand colonial estate nestled at the end of Sycamore Lane. A thin layer of snow dusted the hedges, and her boots left faint prints on the cobbled walkway. The house was quiet, dignified 3 stories high, pale blue shutters, the kind of place where curtains were always drawn, and silence had its own echo. She exhaled slowly, white clouds curling from her lips, then reached for the brass knocker. The door opened before she could use it. A man stood there, tall, early 40s, maybe, crisp sweater over a white shirt, sleeves neatly rolled, his eyes, a stormy gray, locked onto hers with a quiet intensity that made her spine straighten. He didn't speak right away. Before Katie could find her voice, a small figure peeked from behind his leg. Miss Sunshine. The little girl's voice was barely more than a whisper, but her face lit up like a lantern. Hazel eyes wide, a stuffed bunny clutched in one hand. Katie blinked, caught off guard. I'm sorry, she remembers you. The man finally spoke, his voice low and steady. Come in. It's cold. She hesitated for half a second, then stepped inside. The warmth of the house wrapped around her like a reluctant embrace. The entryway smelled faintly of pine and lemonwood polish. Everything was spotless. Too spotless. I'm Katie Dawson, she offered, taking off her coat and hanging it neatly on a hook. I'm just filling in today. Laura, my sister, she's sick. The man nodded. Alex Whitmore. This is Ava. The little girl waved, then quickly skipped down the hallway, humming to herself. Katie tried a smile. She's sweet. Alex didn't smile back. She has her routines. I'll be in my office. Everything she needs is in the kitchen or the playroom. She eats lunch at noon. No screens. She naps at 2. A pause, then a soft, thank you for coming. Katie nodded. Of course. As he disappeared down the hallway, she turned toward the direction Ava had gone. For a moment, she stood there, the silence pressing in around her like the walls of a snow globe. She hadn't expected warmth, not really, but she hadn't expected it to feel quite so hollow either. The playroom door creaked when she pushed it open. Ava sat cross-legged on a fluffy rug, surrounded by blocks and picture books. She looked up, her curls bouncing slightly. Did you forget your song? She asked. Katie tilted her head. What song? The brave one. You sang it before. You were wearing yellow. Ava's voice was soft, but certain. Katie crouched to her level, heart beginning to beat a little faster. Sweetheart, I don't think we've met before. Ava just smiled. You're Miss Sunshine. And suddenly, it clicked, not fully, but just enough to send a ripple through Katie's chest. She had once interned at a preschool in a town not far from here, just for a few weeks. She barely remembered the names of the children only that one afternoon. A girl had cried so hard during nap time. She sat beside her and sang softly until the tears stopped. She never asked her name. Katie's fingers brushed against her jeans. Maybe I do remember, she said softly. Ava's smile widened, and she patted the space beside her. Katie sat down, and for the first time in a long time, something inside her thawed. She spent the morning reading stories in funny voices, arranging puzzle pieces, and listening, really listening to Ava's small talk about clouds and colors and her bunny named Charlie. There was a gentleness in the child's manner, but also something wounded, like her laughter had been packed away for a long time. And Katie understood that feeling more than she cared to admit. By lunchtime, the house didn't feel quite so big anymore. Katie found apples in the fridge, grilled cheese bread, and cut everything into star shapes. Ava giggled. That was the first sound that made Katie look up sharply, because it was real, unfiltered, from the hallway. Alex paused mid-step. He didn't enter the kitchen, just listened. His hand rested on the doorframe. Katie wiped her hands on a towel, glanced out the window, then turned toward the little girl. You know, she said, when I was your age, my mom used to say snow was like a blank page. You get to write anything you want on it. Ava looked up, thoughtful. Even if your story is sad. Katie crouched beside her again, especially then. Behind them, neither of them noticed Alex slowly walking away. Back in his office, he opened the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out a small silver USB. His fingers trembled slightly. The label read simply, "Be Brave Day." He plugged it into his laptop and watched the same 30-second video he had watched over and over for the past 2 years. The office was dim, lit only by a small banker's lamp on the corner of the mahogany desk. Alex Whitmore sat still, shoulders tight, as the video began to play. It was shaky, filmed on a parent's phone, the kind of clip most would delete after a few days. But not him. The camera panned across a preschool auditorium. Hand-painted stars lined the walls, tiny chairs filled with restless children. In the back, one small girl sat alone on a bench, head bowed, shoulders hunched. Ava, just 4 then. Her mother had passed away 2 months before. And then, her. The woman on screen wore a mustard yellow cardigan, her blonde hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She crouched beside Ava, whispered something the camera couldn't pick up. The child looked up at her, eyes red but wide. Then came the song, soft, unaccompanied. Even when someone we love is gone, they live here, every time we smile. Alex had memorized the lyrics, not because they were complex, but because of how she sang them, not performatively, just present. As if the whole world narrowed down to that moment and that child. And Ava, his Ava leaned into her, stopped crying. He paused the video. Back in the present, through the thin walls of his estate, he could hear Ava's laughter, a real laugh, not a polite giggle, not a trained reaction. His hand tightened around the mouse. Could it really be her Katie Dawson? She hadn't recognized him, hadn't hinted that she knew where she was. She wasn't performing. She wasn't angling. And maybe that's what made it harder to ignore. He didn't believe in fate, but he believed in patterns, coincidence, and sometimes the way the universe looped back to the people who mattered, even if you didn't know they did at the time. Downstairs, Katie was humming. He turned off the screen. In the playroom, Katie helped Ava sort puzzle pieces by color. You're really good at this, Katie said gently. Ava shrugged, brushing a curl from her cheek. Mommy used to say I had magic fingers. For puzzles and tying bows? Katie smiled, trying to hold her reaction in place. She sounds like she was lovely. She was, Ava said simply. But she got sick and went to the stars. There was no sadness in the child's voice, only quiet fact. But that quietness, Katie recognized it. The kind of silence that didn't cry out loud, that sat in a corner and whispered its pain when no one listened. Katie reached for another puzzle piece. Do you believe she still watches you? Ava nodded. Dad says he doesn't know, but I think she sends wind when I'm sad. Like hugs. Katie swallowed hard. That's exactly what she used to tell her own mother. Sometimes, Ava continued, when I'm really scared, I pretend I hear her laugh. It helps. Katie glanced at the girl, heart softening with each word. You know, people who can imagine that kind of love, they never lose it. The little girl looked at her, eyes searching. Did you lose someone too? Katie paused, then nodded. Yes. My mom. Not long ago. Ava leaned against her arm. No words. Just a shared warmth. Upstairs. Alex stood silently by the railing, watching. That evening, after Ava had gone to bed, Katie found herself in the kitchen washing a few dishes. The sink was deep, the window above it framed with white curtains. Snow still fell softly, blanketing the porch in silver. She didn't notice Alex until he spoke. She hasn't laughed like that in months. Katie turned, startled. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make noise. I can keep her calmer tomorrow if no. He interrupted. That's not what I meant. She let the dishcloth fall over the edge of the sink. Oh. They stood in a silence that wasn't quite awkward, but not comfortable either. Alex cleared his throat. Do you remember the preschool in Danvers? 2 years ago, Katie blinked. Danvers, Yes, I interned there briefly. Why? He hesitated, then walked to a nearby drawer and pulled out a small folded paper. The edges were worn, the corners bent. He handed it to her. Katie opened it. It was the letter, pink construction paper, her handwriting. A sun doodled in the corner. Dear Ava, I see how strong your heart is, even when it feels like it's breaking. Your mommy loves you from the stars. Every time you are kind or brave, you shine like her. With hugs, Miss Sunshine. Her breath caught. I wrote this, she whispered, but I didn't think. I never knew. She carried it for weeks, Alex said. Then I framed it. Katie looked up. Why, he met her eyes. Because it was the first thing that reached her after the funeral, the first thing that made her believe in light again. Katie folded the letter slowly, fingers trembling. I didn't even sign my name. You didn't have to. She exhaled. The warmth in her chest ached, but it was a good ache, a healing one. She doesn't know. Katie said, no. Alex replied, not yet. Later that night, Katie stood in the guest room, brushing her hair in front of the mirror. Snow fell beyond the window, soft and endless. The silence around her didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt waiting. She thought of the letter, the song, Ava's laughter, and for the first time in a long time, she let herself hope that maybe some moments don't pass. They just wait to be finished. The morning sun filtered gently through the tall windows of the Whitmore estate, casting golden streaks across the pristine hardwood floors. Katie Dawson stirred a bowl of pancake batter with practiced ease, her sleeves rolled up, a faint smudge of flour on her cheek. She hadn't planned to stay another day. But when Laura called again, voice still weak and laced with congestion, Katie agreed without hesitation. Just until you're better, she had said softly, cradling the phone between her shoulder and cheek while whisking eggs. But deep down, she knew it wasn't just for Laura anymore. It was for Ava. And, if she let herself admit it, maybe for something she couldn't quite name. Ava padded into the kitchen in fuzzy slippers, bunny in one hand, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Do you like pancakes shaped like stars or hearts? Katie asked, turning with a smile. Stars, Ava mumbled, climbing onto a stool. Good choice. Brave girls always pick stars. Ava's lips curled into a small smile. That was new. That kind of smile didn't come easily. As Katie poured batter onto the skillet, she glanced toward the hallway. The house was waking slowly. Somewhere above, footsteps moved. then silence again, the kind that wasn't empty, just guarded. Alex. He hadn't spoken much the night before, after handing her the letter. And though they'd shared something unspoken, he had retreated into his room before she could ask what came next. Katie flipped the pancakes, the sizzle grounding her in the present. You know, she said to Ava, when I was little, my mom used to make me pancakes like this on special days. What kind of special? Ava asked, chin resting on her hands. Katie hesitated, the kind where you needed a reason to smile, even if the world didn't give you one. Ava was quiet for a beat, then whispered, like after someone leaves. Katie nodded, her throat tight. Exactly. By the time Alex entered the kitchen, coffee mug in hand, the room smelled of cinnamon and maple syrup. Katie had set 2 plates down, one for Ava and one at the far end of the table. Good morning, she greeted, trying to sound casual. Alex nodded, voice low. Morning. He didn't sit immediately. Instead, he stood by the window, gazing out at the snow-covered lawn, steam rising from his mug. I made some for you too, Katie added gently. I don't usually eat in the mornings. Today might be worth an exception. She didn't push further, just turned back to Ava, who was happily arranging blueberries into a constellation across her plate. Alex watched them quietly. There was something about the way Katie moved around his kitchen, confident but not invasive, present but not demanding. It felt unfamiliar, comforting, in a way he didn't remember missing until now. He finally sat down, and that, Katie knew, was its own kind of progress. Later that afternoon, Katie helped Ava build a pillow fort in the living room. The once cold space now echoed with small giggles and rustling fabric. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, catching dust in golden swirls. The furniture, once pristine and untouched, had become part of a temporary kingdom where queens wore fuzzy socks and dragons were defeated with tickles. You make the best forts, Ava declared from beneath a blanket. Katie grinned. It's a well-honed skill. Comes with being a grown-up who never stopped believing in make-believe. Ava peeked out. Do you think, if Mommy were still here, she'd like you? Katie froze for a second, then knelt, brushing a curl behind Ava's ear. I don't know your mom, but from what I see in you, I think she had a heart big enough to love anyone who made you feel safe. Ava reached out, wrapping her arms around Katie's neck. Upstairs. Alex stood at the top of the staircase, leaning on the banister. He had been heading down to check on Ava but stopped when he heard Katie's voice, soft but certain. Her words weren't rehearsed. They weren't meant to impress. They were true, and that terrified him more than anything. That evening, after Ava had been tucked into bed, Katie lingered in the laundry room. She folded small clothes, humming under her breath. Her hands moved automatically, but her thoughts drifted. She liked it here, more than she should. This wasn't her life. This wasn't her child. This wasn't her home. And yet, every morning felt less like borrowing and more like belonging. When Alex appeared in the doorway, she jumped slightly. Sorry, he said. Didn't mean to startle you. It's okay, she replied, continuing to fold. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed. You don't have to do this. I know. Then why do you? Katie looked up, meeting his eyes. Because someone once told me, when you see something hurting, and you know how to help, it's not kindness to walk away. It's self-preservation. Alex didn't respond for a long moment. Then, quietly, and if you're the one that's hurting, she folded the last shirt, smoothed the edges, and placed it on the pile. Then, you hope someone else chooses to stay. Night came early in Maplewood. By 5:30, the sun had surrendered to twilight, leaving long shadows stretching across the snow-covered lawn. Inside the Whitmore estate, the lamps were dim, the fire in the hearth crackling softly. The warmth felt deeper somehow, less from the flames, and more from the laughter that had echoed in the walls just hours earlier. Katie Dawson stood at the edge of the hallway, hesitating. In her hand, she held the pink letter Alex had given her the night before. She'd read it half a dozen times since then, folding and unfolding it like a habit she couldn't shake. She didn't remember the moment she wrote it, not fully. It had been a blur, one of many afternoons at Danvers preschool, a child crying during rest time, a note scribbled quickly, slipped into a backpack, and forgotten as life moved on. But someone hadn't forgotten. Ava hadn't. And clearly, neither had Alex. Katie walked softly into the study, the letter still warm from her palm. She didn't know exactly why she came, only that her chest ached with a weight she hadn't expected and needed to place it somewhere. Alex was seated behind his desk, his sleeves rolled up, fingers steepled beneath his chin. He looked up when she entered, but didn't stand. Just waited. Katie stepped forward slowly, holding the letter out. "I didn't think anyone kept this," she said. Alex took it back carefully, setting it beside a small silver frame on his desk. Inside the frame was a photograph of Ava and her mother Clara, a woman with dark eyes, soft smile, long auburn hair pulled back in a loose twist. She was beautiful in a way that felt familiar, warm, real. "She found it in her backpack when she got home that day," Alex said, his voice calm but threaded with something deeper. "She carried it around for a week, then folded it, tucked it into her pillowcase. I only found it by accident when changing her sheets." Katie lowered herself into the armchair across from him. "I never thought it mattered. It did," he replied. "To her, to me." Silence settled between them. Katie ran her fingers over the hem of her sweater. "You must have loved her very much." Alex didn't answer immediately. When she got sick, he began slowly. It was fast. 1 month of tests, 3 months of hope. Then, his voice trailed off. Katie watched him carefully, not with pity, but with patience, the kind that waits for someone to feel safe enough to finish their sentence. Alex looked up. "I thought I was holding it together. For Ava. For myself. But the truth is, I was just surviving." Until one day she came home from preschool smiling. Just a little. But it was real. And that night, she sang something about bravery and stars. Katie's breath caught. She never told me who helped her. Alex said, the teachers didn't know. It was a short-term internship. They said, no records, no full names. All I had was the letter and a 30-second video posted by a parent. He looked directly at her now. I watched that clip until the screen burned it into my eyes. I told myself it didn't matter, that she was just a kind stranger. But when I opened the door yesterday, he didn't finish the thought. He didn't have to. Katie felt her heart thudding in her chest, a strange mix of wonder and guilt, of connection and distance. "I didn't know it was you," he said. "Not at first. But Ava did." Katie gave a small, incredulous laugh. She remembered Alex nodded. Children don't forget the people who hold them when they're breaking. Katie stood and walked slowly toward the shelves lining the wall. Books, framed certificates, a photo of Ava in a Halloween costume, all the signs of a man trying to preserve something he couldn't quite name. "You don't have to explain," she said finally. "This wasn't supposed to be anything more than a favor, a one-day stand-in. Do you want it to be more?" he asked. The question hung in the air, quiet but sharp. Katie turned back to face him. "I don't know what this is. Alex, you've lost someone. So have I. And maybe we're both just filling spaces that someone else left behind." His jaw tightened. Maybe. Or maybe you're not a placeholder. Maybe you're the first thing that feels real again. Katie shook her head, overwhelmed. "I'm not Ava's mother. I'm not your wife. I'm just someone who mattered." Alex interrupted gently, "Even when you didn't know it." The words landed with the softness of truth. Katie looked down, swallowing the lump rising in her throat. "I should go," she whispered. "Just clear my head." Alex stood too, but didn't stop her. "If you do, take the letter with you. It was always yours." She stepped into the guest room, closing the door softly behind her. Her breath trembled in her chest. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she unfolded the letter once more. The handwriting was familiar, childlike, a little messy. Hers, from a version of herself she hadn't met in years. A girl who believed kindness, even anonymous, could leave light in dark places. She hadn't written it for recognition or praise. She had written it because it was the only thing she could offer to a grieving child. Now, it was the only thing anchoring her to this strange, beautiful place she hadn't expected to feel like home. And that terrified her, because if she stayed, really stayed, what would happen when it wasn't enough? Morning broke with a gentle hush. Outside the estate, snow clung to the pine trees like a second skin. The sky was a soft, overcast gray, the kind that made everything quieter, more thoughtful. Inside the kitchen, Katie Dawson stood barefoot, humming as she flipped pancakes shaped like crescent moons. The light of the stove cast a warm glow across the counters. She'd found a forgotten bottle of cinnamon in the spice rack and added it on a whim. It smelled like Sunday mornings from her childhood. Ava sat at the table with colored pencils and a blank notebook, tongue sticking out slightly in concentration as she drew. "What are you making today?" Katie asked, pouring another circle of batter. "A book," Ava replied without looking up. "It's about stars that talk to each other." Katie smiled. "I'd love to read it when it's done." "You're in it," Ava said simply. Katie paused, ladle still in hand. "I am Ava," nodded. "You're the star that tells the others not to be afraid of the dark." Katie's breath caught. She turned back to the skillet, blinking faster than she'd like. By mid-morning, the house had settled into a quiet rhythm. Alex had left early for a meeting downtown, but not before pausing at the kitchen door. "Will you be here when I get back?" he asked. Katie had looked up from Ava's hair, which she was braiding. "That depends." On what she hadn't answered, only smiled, and that silence said more than words. Later that afternoon, while Ava napped curled into a quilt on the couch, Katie stepped out into the backyard. Snow crunched beneath her boots as she walked the familiar path past the dormant garden beds and down to the bench under the old oak tree. It was where she often found herself when her thoughts grew louder than she could handle indoors. She sat, pulling her coat tighter, and let her mind wander. A gentle buzz in her pocket broke the stillness. She pulled out her phone. A message. "Miss Dawson, we'd love to welcome you back. A full-time position has opened at Lakeside Elementary. Let us know by Monday." Katie stared at the screen. The message blinked like a lighthouse in fog. Familiar, stable, everything she had once told herself she wanted. And yet, her stomach twisted. Why did this place, this child, this house, this man feel less like a temporary stop and more like something she wasn't ready to let go? She was still holding her phone when Alex returned. He found her in the backyard, the soft glow of dusk washing over her face. "You're freezing," he said, shrugging off his coat and draping it over her shoulders before sitting beside her. Katie didn't speak. Instead, she handed him the phone. He read the message, his face unreadable. "When did they offer?" he asked. "This morning." Alex handed the phone back. "Congratulations." "Thanks." The silence between them stretched long and slow, like snow melting on stone. "You should take it," he said eventually. Katie looked at him. "Do you want me to? I want you to do what makes you happy." "That's not an answer." He hesitated, then spoke more softly. "I don't want to be the reason you stay if staying costs you something you need." Katie's voice was quiet. "What if what I need isn't a job?" Alex's gaze met hers, and for the first time, something shifted in his eyes. Not longing, not gratitude. Hope. "I didn't plan on this," Katie continued, "any of it. But the way Ava smiles now, the way this house breathes again, it's not nothing." Alex exhaled. "No, it's everything." They sat in stillness again, the kind that said everything words couldn't. Then Ava's voice called from the porch, pulling them back. "Miss Sunshine." "It's dinner time." Katie stood, handing Alex his coat. As she walked back toward the house, she realized something both terrifying and beautiful. The decision wasn't about which life she wanted to live. It was about which life she was brave enough to choose. It began with a whisper, Katie noticed it as she tucked Ava into bed, a slight flush on the girl's cheeks, the way her eyelids fluttered like they were too heavy. Ava usually asked for 2 stories and a song, but tonight, she simply laid back against the pillow and sighed. "You okay, sweetheart?" Katie asked, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Ava didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, "My tummy feels floaty." Katie pressed her palm gently to the little girl's forehead. Too warm. Her stomach tightened. Alex had just finished clearing the last of the dinner dishes when he heard quick footsteps down the hallway. Katie appeared in the kitchen, her voice calm but firm. "She's warm. I think she's running a fever." Alex immediately stood. "How high?" "Not dangerously yet, but it's climbing. I'll stay with her tonight." He hesitated, torn between panic and responsibility. "You don't have to. I want to," Katie said, cutting him off gently. "She's scared, and when you're scared, you need someone who stays." Alex looked at her, really looked. She wasn't just saying the words. She meant them, every syllable. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll get the thermometer and medicine." The hours that followed were slow, quiet, and intimate in the way only fevered nights can be. Katie stayed curled beside Ava, holding a damp cloth to her forehead, whispering stories about stars that hummed lullabies through the sky. Every so often, Ava would drift off for 10 or 20 minutes, only to stir again with a whimper or cough. Katie never left the bed. At one point, sometime after midnight, she leaned back against the headboard, her arm cradling Ava's small frame. The house was utterly silent. Outside the window, snow fell so softly it looked like breath on glass. Then she noticed it, a small tray placed just inside the door, a mug of warm ginger tea, a folded note. She reached for it, eyes already glistening before she even opened it. "You stayed for her. Thank you." There was no full name, no explanation, just 7 words that broke her. Katie pressed the paper to her chest, her throat tight. She hadn't realized how much she'd needed someone to see her, to acknowledge that her presence meant something more than just convenience. By 3:15, Ava's fever had begun to break. Katie felt it first in the shift of the child's breathing slower, steadier. She whispered a soft thank you into the hush of the room and didn't move for a long time. She stayed like that until morning, not out of obligation, but because something deep inside her had already chosen to. The sun had just begun to rise when Alex peeked into the room. Katie sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing Ava's hair, a blue ribbon in her hand. "She's okay," Katie said softly, not turning around. "I think we're in the clear." Alex stepped inside. "You stayed up all night." She nodded. He didn't speak for a moment. Then, "Thank you." Katie turned then, looking at him with tired but steady eyes. "I wasn't going to leave her," she said. "I know," he replied, "but that doesn't make it any less remarkable." Later that morning, while Ava nibbled toast at the table, Katie sat alone in the backyard again, her coat draped over her knees like a blanket. The trees swayed gently in the wind, and for once, the cold felt less like an enemy and more like clarity. Her phone buzzed. A reminder. 3 days left to reply to Lakeside Elementary. Katie closed the screen. She had told herself she'd decide soon, but how do you choose between a steady job and the place where your heart had finally begun to feel again? She didn't have an answer, but when she walked back into the house and saw Ava's smile, soft and sleepy, and the way Alex glanced up from his coffee like he was waiting not out of habit, but out of hope, something in her steadied. She didn't know what tomorrow would ask of her, but she knew this. She wasn't just staying for the child. She wasn't just staying for the father. She was staying for herself. The decision came quietly. Like most things Katie Dawson truly felt, it didn't arrive with noise or drama, just a slow ache in the chest, a certainty that nestled into her bones while she watched Ava nap that afternoon. The fever had passed, but something deeper lingered in the house, an unspoken tension that neither she nor Alex had dared to name. Katie stood at the kitchen sink, her hands motionless in the warm water. Through the window, she could see the sky beginning to gray again, the soft edge of a storm forming at the horizon. Behind her, Alex leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. He didn't speak right away. He didn't have to. "I got the offer," Katie said softly, her eyes fixed on the drifting clouds. "The job. I'm going to take it." Silence followed, heavy and still. Alex stepped forward. "Is it what you want?" Katie nodded, slowly, but her voice shook. "It's what I was meant to do. Teaching is... it's where I belong." Her hands gripped the edge of the sink. "And this what we have here, it was never supposed to be permanent. I was just filling in." "You were never just anything," Alex said, his voice low. "Not to her, not to me." Katie turned then, finally meeting his gaze. There was no anger in his eyes, no disappointment, just sadness, and something else, a plea he wasn't brave enough to speak. "I'm not Ava's mother," she whispered. "I'm not your partner. I was just someone passing through. You were the one who stayed," he replied. Katie swallowed hard, then stepped back, her decision trembling in every movement. "I have to go," she said. That evening, her sister Laura returned, recovered, cheerful, oblivious to the silent war playing out in Katie's heart. They exchanged hugs, packed bags in silence. Katie kissed Ava on the forehead, held her tiny hand just a moment longer than necessary. "I'll write to you," she promised. "Will you come back?" Ava asked, voice small, eyes wide. Katie smiled through the crack in her chest. "We'll see, sweetheart." "Okay," and then she left. Outside. The snow had begun again, falling heavier than before. It muffled her footsteps as she walked down the stone path. The cab waited at the curb, engine running. Katie climbed in, pulled the door closed behind her, and refused to look back. Her heart pounded, loud and unrelenting, but just as the driver reached for the ignition, a voice rang out behind them. "Wait." Laura ran up, breathless. A small brown box in her hands. "Mr. Whitmore asked me to give you this," she said, pressing it through the window. Katie took it silently. The box was plain, tied with twine. Inside was a single item, a wooden frame. Behind the glass was the letter. Her letter. The one she'd written on pink paper 2 years ago. The sun in the corner. The childlike handwriting. "Even when someone we love is gone. They live here every time we smile." Beneath it, in fresh black ink, Alex's handwriting. "To the woman who changed 2 lives, with a few kind words." Katie pressed the frame to her chest, the tears silent but unstoppable. Outside, the snow blurred the world, but inside, her heart was painfully, beautifully clear. She hadn't just left a house. She'd left part of herself behind. In the days that followed, Katie returned to her life like someone slipping back into an old coat. The hallways of Lakeside Elementary welcomed her. The children greeted her with wide eyes and quick laughter. Story time resumed. Bulletin boards filled with artwork. Everything was as it had been, except it wasn't. Katie moved through her days with grace, but something in her had shifted. During lunch breaks, her gaze lingered on empty corners. When a child laughed in a particular way, she turned too quickly, as if expecting another voice. At night, her apartment felt colder. In the mornings, she poured coffee without waiting for another cup beside hers. She had made the logical choice, the responsible choice, but sometimes the heart doesn't measure in logic. It measures in absence. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, her life shifted again. The school secretary knocked on her classroom door with a package in hand. "This came for you," she said. "No return address." Katie took it, her hands already trembling. Her name was written in crayon, uneven, bright. Inside was a handmade book, thick construction paper, bound with blue ribbon, stickers of stars and bears, a drawing on the cover Ava and Miss Sunshine, holding hands beneath a sky of stars. Katie gasped softly. Each page told a story, flower on Katie's nose, books in their lap, Alex in the background watching, Ava's memories, drawn with the vivid love only children could express. The final page was simple, a red heart, and 4 words, in unmistakable handwriting. Come home, Miss Sunshine. Katie pressed the book to her chest, tears spilling freely now. She didn't think. She just stood. I have to go, she told the secretary. Family thing. And before anyone could ask, she was out the door into the wind, into the cold, into the unknown. But this time, she wasn't running away. She was running home. The laughter in the classroom was bright, bouncing off the walls like sunlight. Markers clattered, crayons rolled under desks, and children buzzed with energy as they passed around a box of glitter and glue. Katie Dawson sat at her desk, smiling at least. That's how it looked from the outside. She clapped her hands once. Okay, artists, 10 more minutes, then we'll clean up before snack time. The children groaned playfully, but no one protested. Her voice still had its soft authority, her rhythm with the kids still instinctive. She was good at this. She had always been good at this. But lately, the joy came in borrowed flashes. It wasn't the children. It wasn't the job. It was the echo of a laugh that didn't belong to this classroom. At night, Katie sat in her quiet apartment, her dinner untouched, her TV playing softly to an empty room. She had unpacked her suitcases, sorted through old lesson plans, and scheduled parent-teacher conferences. Everything was in place. But Ava's giggle haunted the quiet. So did the sound of Alex's footsteps as he crossed the hall toward his office, the warmth of a kitchen that smelled like cinnamon and maple syrup, the crinkle of paper as Ava folded her stars. Now. Her mornings began with silence. No soft knock on her door, no tiny voice asking if she could braid her hair into princess loops. Just a familiar kettle and 1 cup of coffee. 1. The framed letter sat on her bedside table now. She had placed it there the first night she returned. Unsure if it would comfort or hurt, it did both. She found herself rereading it almost every day. Not just the words in her own handwriting, the ones she had scrawled out years ago with no idea they would matter, but the line beneath. To the woman who changed 2 lives with a few kind words. Sometimes, she whispered it aloud, as if trying to convince herself it was real, that she had, somehow, mattered. Then came Thursday. It was nearly sunset when her school secretary knocked gently on the classroom door. You've got a package, she said, her voice holding something more than casual. Katie looked up. A package. The woman placed a small, soft parcel on her desk, wrapped in brown paper, tied with a ribbon that looked suspiciously like something taken from a child's craft box. Katie's name was written in crayon. Her breath caught. She opened it slowly, fingers trembling. Inside was a handmade book, construction paper bound by yarn, corners glittering with stickers. On the cover, a drawing of Ava holding hands with Katie. Above them, written in uneven letters, me and Miss Sunshine. Katie gasped, one hand over her mouth. Each page was a memory. Flower on noses, bunny ears drawn on napkins. Ava nestled in Katie's lap with a book open, snowflakes falling as they built a lopsided snowman. And in every single picture, Alex was there too, in the corner, in the background, always watching. Always smiling, always present. Katie turned the pages with tears slipping down her cheeks. Then came the last one, a red heart drawn with care. Beneath it, in Ava's unmistakable handwriting, come home, Miss Sunshine. Katie didn't move for a long time. She simply sat, the book open on her desk, the warmth of a child's love filling every crack she had tried to seal shut. And then she stood, not because she had decided, but because her heart already had. She didn't call, didn't text. She simply left a note on the secretary's desk. Family matter. I'll be in touch. Outside, the cold air hit her like a splash of truth. She hailed the first cab she saw, climbed in with the book still clutched in her hands, and whispered an address she hadn't spoken in days. The cabbie didn't ask questions. Neither did she. As the trees blurred past, her fingers traced the edges of the pages, the weight of them, the color, the care. This wasn't a goodbye. It had never been one. It was a bridge, one drawn in crayon and stars, held together by the steady hands of a child who knew better than most that when love finds you, you don't let it go. The cab pulled to a stop just as twilight began to surrender to night. The familiar iron gates of the Whitmore estate loomed ahead, softened now by the amber glow spilling from the windows beyond. Snow blanketed the stone path like a welcome mat rolled out just for her. Katie Dawson stepped out of the car, heart pounding like a second heartbeat in her throat. The cold air bit at her cheeks, but she barely felt it. All her focus was fixed on the house, the one she had entered weeks ago as a stranger, the one she had left days ago with her heart still trapped inside. She hesitated at the gate, the handmade book still clutched tightly to her chest. Would he still want her here? Would Ava still be waiting? Would it be too late? Her boots crunched softly as she made her way up the walkway, each step slower than the last. She reached the porch. The light above the doorway flickered once, then steadied. She raised her hand to knock, then paused. She didn't get the chance. The door opened. Warmth spilled out, along with the scent of cinnamon and old wood, and something that smelled almost like memory. And there he was. Alex Whitmore stood in the doorway, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, a dish towel in one hand. His eyes, those quiet, storm-gray eyes, met hers. He didn't speak, not at first, but everything in his face said what words couldn't. Katie, he breathed, like a prayer finally answered. Before she could find her voice, a smaller one rang out from within the house, Miss Sunshine Ava. She darted forward from the living room, hair bouncing, feet bare against the hardwood floor. Before Katie could brace herself, the little girl launched into her arms. Katie dropped to her knees, wrapping both arms around Ava's tiny frame, her tears falling silently into the child's coat. "I knew you'd come back," Ava whispered. Katie pulled back just enough to kiss her forehead. "I missed you, sweetheart, so much." When she looked up again, Alex was still standing there, watching, still stunned, still waiting. He stepped forward, slower now, as if afraid a single wrong word might undo everything. "I got your book," Katie said, her voice shaking. He nodded. "We made it together. Every night before bed, she'd ask if you were coming back." Katie tried to smile, but her lips trembled. "And you didn't send a message, or call." Alex exhaled. "I didn't want to make it harder for you, but every day, I hoped." She stood, Ava still clinging to her hand, and looked at him. "And now I wonder," he said gently, "if you're really here." Katie reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the letter, the same one he had written beneath her own, framed with care. She handed it to him, fingers shaking. "You asked a question," she whispered. "You said, would I stay?" Alex unfolded the letter slowly, reading the words he already knew by heart. Then he looked up. "I meant it," he said. "Not just for her, but for me too." Katie's breath caught. She nodded. "And this time, I'm not here for just a day." Alex stepped closer, eyes filled with something fierce and tender. "Are you sure?" Katie smiled through the tears. "I was never more sure of anything." He reached for her hand, and Ava squeezed in tighter between them, looking up. "Does this mean you're staying forever?" Katie crouched again, pulling both of them into her arms. "If you'll have me." The three of them stood in the golden quiet, wrapped in warmth and snow, and something deeper than all of it, the kind of love that doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It just stays. Later that evening, after Ava had drifted to sleep in Katie's lap, with her bunny tucked close, Alex lit the fireplace in the den. Katie stood by the window, watching the snow swirl beneath the porch light. Alex approached, silent. In his hand was another folded paper, not a letter this time, but a simple page from a notepad. "I wrote this," he said, "in case you ever came back. But I would have kept it even if you didn't." He handed it to her. Katie opened it slowly. "Dear Miss Sunshine, you were never just a nanny. You were never just a guest. From the moment you looked at my daughter like she was the most important story you'd ever read, I knew you gave her smile back. You gave me something I didn't know I was allowed to want again. A beginning. Katie looked up, eyes shining. "There's no ring," Alex said softly. "Not yet. Just a question." She nodded. Yes. And that was enough. The house breathed differently now. Not louder, not busier, just fuller. As if something long held in had finally exhaled in the mornings. Ava's soft footsteps padded into the kitchen before the sun rose. Katie Dawson hummed as she flipped pancakes, now shaped like moons, stars, and sometimes lopsided hearts. Alex Whitmore would join them a few minutes later, still half asleep, his tie always slightly crooked, until Katie straightened it with a quiet smile. Their rhythm was unspoken, but sure, like music you didn't realize you'd been missing. The days stretched gently, full of quiet rituals, reading on the porch wrapped in wool blankets, drawing constellations on paper, folding laundry with laughter instead of silence. And in the evenings, when the sky turned indigo, they didn't talk about what could have been. They just were. Katie didn't ask for guarantees. Alex didn't offer promises he wasn't ready to make. But between them lived something stronger than vows' presence. And presence, it turned out, was the greatest kind of love. One Thursday evening, as winter wind tapped softly at the windows, Ava fell asleep curled against Katie on the couch, her bunny tucked tight in her arms. Alex sat in the armchair nearby, a book open but unread in his lap. His gaze was on them, on the softness of Katie's hand as it brushed through Ava's hair, on the way her breathing slowed to match the little girl's. He didn't say anything until the fire burned low. "I never thought the house would sound like this again," he said quietly. Katie looked up, meeting his eyes. "Like what? Like home." Later. As she turned down the bed in the guest room, she now simply called hers. Katie noticed a new frame sitting on the small table by the window. It wasn't fancy, simple wood, no glass, just paper, pressed between care and time. Inside it, the first letter. Pink construction paper, her childlike handwriting, the sun in the corner, and below it, in Alex's neat, deliberate script. Sometimes a name isn't needed. Sometimes a heart signs louder than ink. Katie sat on the edge of the bed, the frame in her lap. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she whispered, "I'm not going anywhere. Not to the frame, not to Alex, but to herself." The next morning, snow began to fall again, slow and steady. While Ava helped Katie write names on holiday cards, Alex stepped out for a moment and returned with a small envelope. He handed it to Katie. "This came today. I asked them to forward it." She opened it carefully. Inside was a single line on school letterhead. "We're sorry to hear you won't be returning to Lakeside. We wish you well in whatever new chapter you're writing." Katie smiled. She tucked the letter into a drawer she cleared for herself. And that was that. Weeks passed, and spring teased the edges of the trees. The house remained quiet in the right ways, and loud in all the ones that mattered, giggles echoing up the staircase, music from the kitchen, the creak of old floorboards under playful feet. One Saturday, Ava ran up the hall carrying a sheet of paper, her face lit with excitement. "Miss Sunshine." Look, Katie crouched to her level. "What's this?" "It's our family tree," Ava said proudly. "You're on it now." Katie's breath caught. Alex stood nearby, arms folded loosely, watching. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. That night, while Ava slept and the stars blinked through the windows, Katie stood with Alex in the reading nook, small, warm, quiet. He took her hand gently. "I'm not asking for forever," he said, voice low, "but I'm ready to build it one day at a time. With you, with her." Katie smiled. "You already have." And in that home, tucked between memories and second chances, lived a letter that had never been signed, but had written the beginning of everything. Sometimes, the moments that change our lives forever begin in silence. This story reminds us that the smallest acts, an encouraging word, a gentle presence, a quiet choice to stay, can echo far beyond what we ever imagined. Katie didn't plan to return to a place she'd once passed through. She didn't expect a child to remember her voice, or a grieving father to hold on to a forgotten letter. But life, especially in our later years, often teaches us this: the things we do out of kindness, not obligation, are the ones that truly matter. For many of us, time brings reflection. We look back and wonder if we made a difference. This story says yes, you did. Even if you never saw the results, love doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes, it comes in a bedtime story, a cup of tea, or a handwritten note no one was supposed to keep. Let this remind us, it's never too late to choose connection over comfort, presence over perfection. And sometimes, what we thought was just a moment becomes someone else's reason to believe again. Thank you for joining us on this heartfelt journey. If this story touched a memory, stirred an emotion, or simply reminded you of the quiet power of kindness, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that speak to the soul. Your support helps us continue to tell the stories that matter. Until next time, stay kind, stay present, and keep believing in second chances.